Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for May 1st through 7th, 2023. So yeah, we are officially in May, and we are coming up to the conclusion of eclipse season, although, kind of owing to the capricious nature of eclipses, even though we have the exact eclipses on particular dates, they are still with us into the coming weeks and months. That's just the way that it goes. So if you're watching live, always say hello. How are you feeling? Not only this eclipse energy, that's sort of our main headliner for today, but also how are you feeling Pluto retrograde? This is our first big check-in with Pluto in Aquarius. As you may remember, Pluto went into Aquarius for the first time in 200 plus years, way back in March 23rd. And that's a much bigger topic. It's a much bigger chapter. It's going to be 20 years of our life, and sort of in this 2024 time frame, we are sort of kind of stepping out of one big chapter that began in 2008 and stepping into another that takes us all the way into the 2040s. I know, 2040s. We're all going to be like flying cars by then, or just robots. But so we've got Pluto retrograde. We've got a Scorpio full moon lunar eclipse on May 5th. We got some really powerful energy lined up. Sounds very scorpionic, plutonic, could be a Plutonian, which means a lot of deep emotions and feelings are coming up. So again, let me know how you are feeling, and always let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see where everybody is, whether you are watching me live here on Facebook or also watching the replay, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube. I like to, Spotify. I like to kind of make sure everything is every place. So anyway, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer and psychic medium here in the New York City area, and every week we gather live, kind of like your friendly weather report, to look at the astrology and to really start to understand that the astrology is 50%. We are the other 50%. But there are times in the astrology, and this week is one of them, where that other 50% that's not us feels big. It is an evolutionary force. Pluto, it is an energy that sort of marks the different chapters of our lives, and sometimes very swiftly so. Lunar eclipse, even the solar eclipse 2 weeks ago on April 20th, and how this is a time when things can come, people can come in and out of our lives. So maybe you're already starting to see this energy present itself. That's, like I said, that's kind of the funny nature of eclipses. We can see the eclipse before the eclipse. We're also the halfway mark of Mercury retrograde. You know me, I typically don't sweat Mercury retrograde. I actually just got back from 2 days in Miami. Yeah, I traveled during Mercury retrograde. I make decisions during Mercury retrograde. I'm not saying Mercury retrograde isn't a thing, but life goes on. We just have to learn to navigate and negotiate it with it. So yeah, we've got lots to cover today. Let's just dive in and start with the astrology of this week, May 1st through 7th, 2023. Let's start with the Pluto retrograde, because Pluto, as you heard me say a few moments ago, it's been in Aquarius since March 23rd, 2023. In this year, we are only going to see like a few months of a preview of Pluto in Aquarius, and it's sort of getting us ready for a bigger transition point that takes us into 2024 and beyond. And it's not to say that we're really going to be able to grasp fully what Pluto in Aquarius is. We can sort of academically look at it and maybe even start to get a little bit of feelings for it. Astrology is one of those annoying things that we typically see it more in hindsight than we sometimes do in the moment. We're able to connect the dots in hindsight. And it's going to be one of those points where we're going to, continue to go back. Like, what was going on in March, April, May of 2023? How did that, do you see any changes? And how did that start to open up a bigger chapter for you, depending on where where Aquarius is in your astrology. And when we go through the 12 zodiac signs, I'll just quickly remind you where Aquarius is. And your zodiac, your astrology, you may be thinking like, well, Katie, I'm not an Aquarius. I'm like, you have Aquarius as part of your astrology. You have all 12 signs. You may be a Virgo, but Aquarius, in the case of Virgo, is your 6th sign of health and wellness. For example, is for us also, and that's another good reminder, that I'm a holistic astrologer. Astrology measures a lot of things: time, structure of time, archetypes, energy, but it doesn't measure us. It doesn't measure consciousness. It doesn't measure the human that is living in the astrology. You can't necessarily pathologize astrology. You have to sort of see it as a lot of different potentials that we may be navigating. So yeah, and not every, to use my example from a few moments ago, not every Virgo is going to live this time the same. Not every Scorpio is going to live this time the same. For example, it's Aquarius is Scorpio's 4th sign of home and family. But what is Pluto? Well, Pluto is an evolutionary force. And I said a few moments ago, there are some weeks, this week is one of them, where that evolutionary energy, that 50%, that's not us, seems a bit bigger. Pluto's job is to get us to transform by any means possible. It's just how it works. Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, these are the 3 evolutionary planets. You could argue that there are more, but these are newer additions into astrology in the last 15, 20 years. I don't have a grasp on them. And frankly, some of these planets move so slowly, like Sedna, 11,000 years, that it will pretty much sit in the same place for our entire life. But anyway, Pluto, not as dramatic, 248 years to go around the sun, to go around our astrology. But Pluto's job is to get us to transform. How does it do that? It holds a mirror to us. Pluto is about power, whether it's the power that powers or fuels relationship, socializing. It powers our ambitions, it powers our fears, it powers our insecurities and our inhibitions. And how do we use Pluto's energy to reform and transform? So I'm going to continue to use Virgo as an example. How do we use Pluto's energy to reform and transform our relationship? If we're Virgo or Virgo rising, our relationship with our body, our health and wellness. How do we take care of ourselves? The systems that sort of manage on a day-to-day level and govern our lives. And even how do we inhabit our body? Because a lot of us inhabit our mind. We don't inhabit our body. You'd be surprised how many conversations I have with clients that you're just living up in your head and you got to come back in to your body. But yeah, Pluto's going to be different for everybody. And it's for you to start to see what is being brought out of the unconscious, what is being brought out of your shadow, your blind spots, so that you can put it into light and to have it start to be a very different type of energy that powers key areas of your life. For some of us, Pluto means facing ourselves, facing the sometimes dark parts. We're human beings. We all have dark parts to us. It's just part of creation. It's like, are we sort of gripped by them? Do we succumb to them? Or is everything in perfect balance and harmony? And ultimately, Pluto does want everything in perfect balance and harmony. It can be an agent of creation and putting our lives back into order. Because another good example for the Virgo and Virgo rising people watching, just to kind of further that example. So again, Pluto and Aquarius, 20 years, and we're not going to really be fully ensconced in this Pluto and Aquarius era until November of 2024. So we still got that one foot in that Pluto and Capricorn story, that story that began in January of 2008. If you are a Capricorn, if you are a cardinal sign, you know what I'm talking about. And life looks very different than it did 15 years ago. So yeah, Pluto turns retrograde. It's bringing up a lot of deep emotions, which then brings me to the Scorpio Lunar Eclipse. So here we are, we're in Taurus season. I love Taurus season. Taurus season is about the rebirth and the fertility of life. here we are, it's May 1st, May Day, this time when sort of we have Beltane, we have the, the symbol of flowers. I learned a fun fact that it's sort of like a tradition in France to bring the bouquets of lily of the valley as sort of this symbolic gesture of good luck. But there's this day that deep in the memory of human beings, we know that this is a sacred day. We know that this is a time when we celebrate, we have festivals that celebrate the rebirth of life. On the other side of the spectrum is Scorpio. Scorpio is the sign that is opposite of Taurus. If Taurus is the rebirth and life in full bloom, then Scorpio is decay. I know you've heard me say this before. I am a Scorpio, and I know decay is kind of a heavy-duty word, but it's a part of life. If you've ever gotten a beautiful bouquet of flowers, mayflowers, peonies, I love peonies, and then within a few days, those flowers droop and they start to die. And that's just part of the life cycle. So Scorpio's job is just to remind us that the part of the life cycle in this world of matter and manifestation means that things that bloom need to die. Things that have life need to end. It is part of the wheel of life, especially the sort of wheel of life that we see with the fixed signs: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. For example, these are the signs of matter and manifestation. I mean, they govern over our material and manifested world. Doesn't get more material and manifested than Taurus, sign of money, property, income, ownership. And then Scorpio, which is wealth, it's a money sign, it's wealth and finance, but it sort of stands in contrast to Taurus, and it's like you can't take it with you. So here we are. We're going to have a Scorpio lunar eclipse on May 5th at 14 degrees of Scorpio, just shy of 15 degrees if you're getting really, kind of specific about it. A lunar eclipse. What is a lunar eclipse? A lunar eclipse is number one, a full moon. It's a full moon that's within certain degrees of the ecliptic. The ecliptic in astrology, this might be some technical language for you, is measured by the lunar nodes. The lunar nodes are these 2 points that form an axis, and you put it into an astrology chart, and it's a powerful axis of fate. Scientifically, they make eclipses happen. If that full moon is, I think it's within 17 degrees of the ecliptic, if there is a full moon within that kind of sweet spot, you have a lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse is when the Earth passes in front of the sun and obscures, occults, either partial or full, the light of the moon. So here we are, May 5th. We're going to have a full moon. It is only visible in Australia and parts of Asia. So sorry for those that want to see it here, where I am in the neck of the woods, in North America and the United States. But it is a time astrologically, symbolically, energetically, where something comes into the forefront. Typically, full moons are trigger points in the astrology. We sort of culturally know this. Things get a little, kind of crazy, a little loony around a full moon. It's because there's a surge of emotional energy, and sometimes that surge of emotional energy can take us off our grounding. Well, here we have an eclipse. It's even more. An eclipse is a very powerful event, like that new moon solar eclipse where the energies between the sun and the earth are kind of momentarily cut. This is a pivot point. Something demands our attention, and sometimes dramatically so. This is just sort of what eclipses do. They can be a little dramatic. If we want to have a sort of a zoomed out understanding of this eclipse, all we have to do is go back to Scorpio solar eclipse on October 25th of 2022. What was going on? Do you see any recurring themes, any connections between October and now? Let's go back a little bit further, 6 months before. There was a Scorpio lunar eclipse on May 16th of 2022. I can't remember the degree. I think it was 25 degrees of Scorpio, right on my sun. And that eclipse, maybe events from last May or even April, we see a connection to this time. These eclipses are part of a series of eclipses that have been unfolding since November of 2021. We had that first eclipse, Taurus, full moon, I think it was at 27 degrees, 28 degrees of Taurus back on November 19th of 2021. So these are these like points 6 months apart where we see a common thread. Hopefully, maybe you do, maybe you don't. The thing that's very, I think, important to note about this eclipse is it's making something called an opposition to Uranus. Uranus, like Pluto, is an evolutionary force. It works a little bit differently than Pluto. Pluto is reformation and transformation, is the deep dive into the hidden self, the dark self, the shadow self, so that we can put something into light. Uranus is about awakenings. It's about shaking us out of the status quo. It's strokes of genius, but it's also sometimes sudden events and even sometimes that chaotic energy that is around those sudden events. But if you are Taurus, especially if you're born the beginning of Taurus, you know already what I'm talking about. Life does not look the same as it has over the past few years. Taurus has had a little bit of a visitor since 2018, 2019. In May of 2019, Uranus went into Taurus for the first time in 80 odd years, 84 years. Uranus, again, evolutionary energy, and now it's focusing that energy on Taurus. Taurus sign, money, matter, manifestation. It's a fixed sign. It's about keeping our lives stable, grounded. Has our lives been stable and grounded since 2019, 2020? Probably not. The May of 2018 to November 2018 timeframe, that was Uranus's first dip into Taurus. It went out and then it went back in on May 6th of 2019 to, be there for 6 years. Here we are, we're a little bit past that halfway mark, but this eclipse is activating that energy. For some of us, this is going to be a pretty intense week. Something comes to a forefront. We have to make a decision. It brings to a head that Uranus energy. It's a pivot point. It's an evolutionary moment. And for some of us, we can really see how it threads to these different points throughout 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. If you are a fixed sign, especially my Scorpios, if you are born around November 6th, 7th, and 8th, this is a full moon that is on you. This is a dynamic time for you. You're in the spotlight. Life may be a little loud, and events around you may be loud as a result. If you are born on May 5th, May 4th, May 6th, give or take, you are going into a year that has this really dynamic energy to it. It's not positive, it's not negative, it's just dynamic. It demands change, it demands action. The energy of this eclipse is pointing over to Mars in Cancer. And Cancer is about home and family, feeling safe, feeling secure. Kind of like Taurus. Taurus and Cancer are two of these very delightful signs. But Taurus, it gets security and stability physically, materially. Cancer gets stability and security emotionally. So we're kind of seeing these deeper emotional points and maybe not feeling safe, or themes around intimacy, power, control, vulnerability, the psyche, family, the past, memory, all coming up with this full moon. What's going to happen? I don't know. This is why I like to kind of thread it back to other periods of time, because then we can sort of understand it in a larger context and time frame, and hopefully not get too spooked about eclipses. But for some of us, this is a turning point, and maybe a turning point that's been in the work since that solar eclipse. And here's the funny thing, and I kind of said this a couple times before, sometimes we have to really wait to see what this eclipse is about. It can take a month, it can take a few weeks. I saw that with like I said, the eclipse on May 16th last year was right on my sun, kind of within X amount of minutes. I didn't see the eclipse really come to a head until June. So maybe if you're born on November 6th, 7th, 8th, you see the same for yourself. Sometimes we have to get to the midpoint of the eclipses, and this will be the summer. So this summer is going to be one of our major checkpoints with the eclipses. So it's a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to process. I think the big thing to understand is that a lot of emotional material, especially with Mars and Cancer, a lot of primal emotional material is starting to move and come up. Pay attention to your dreams. Be very aware and vigilant, and maybe vigilant's a strong word, but sort of sit with yourself so you sort of see the emotional triggers and cues that are coming up this week. If you start to get frustrated, angry, it's like, okay, where is this coming from? Is it mine? Is it old? Is it coming from my parents? Is a deeper story about money and safety coming up? Do I have enough? And sometimes, when we get into that Scorpio energy, we have to face our fears. It's just part of the sign. Again, I'm saying this as a Scorpio. And the other thing I think I want to highlight is that Scorpio is a water sign. So, one of the things, and I really realized this when I was doing my Saturn masterclass last year, we went through each zodiac sign, is that, before I could tell you, okay, water, the element water, is an element about emotion. And yes, that's true. Empathy, compassion, feeling, sense. But to really understand water within the context of the previous elements, the first element in astrology is fire, followed by earth, followed by air, and then you get to water. And it's to really understand the role of water in the elements in astrology. And when we get to water, although it's really I think it's more pronounced in Scorpio than it is in Cancer, the first water sign, water transports us, meaning it moves us to a different space, a different stage of life, a different journey. And sometimes we can get stuck in Scorpio, meaning we want to hold on to something, we don't want to let it go, and that stops the flow of water. We need water to bring us, in the case of Scorpio, to Sagittarius, the next sign, which is also a fire sign. It restarts the sequence of elements. And Sagittarius is about faith, it's truth, it's meaning. And sometimes we need that leap of faith to let something go. And so I think, to kind of leave you all with something, it's that we have to have the faith, the bravery, the courage to really let something go that maybe it's past its sell-by date, it's past its prime. We're looking at something that we know has to, air quotes, die. And that's hard. And how do we make peace with that? And sometimes how do we make peace when it is something that's beyond our control? Life, capital L, life. And sometimes the eclipses do bring capital L, life. But it's to really sit with this energy of water, the water that transports us, the primal waters of Cancer, with Mars in Cancer, this sense of home and family and security and stability and air quotes, mother and feeling safe, kind of in that energy. And, how do we allow that emotional process? Because that's the thing, you cannot transform unless you have an emotional reaction. Meaning sometimes we get stuck in our head, we just want to intellectualize and analyze something, but we don't allow for an emotional process. So I'm just sort of drilling this in you all so that this week, however it works out for you, allows a necessary emotional process that can transport you to someplace new. So that said, let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs. Like I said, we have a lot to cover today. Starting with Aries. So Aries, lots going on, especially concerning your planet Mars. So Mars has been in Cancer, and this has been the past how many weeks, since March 25th. Mars has been in Cancer. It's been about home and family, roots and foundation, past and memory. This Scorpio eclipse, it's got a bit of a edge to it, if I'm being completely honest. It's getting into really a deep emotional points. It's really, as I was saying, and as I closed out the introduction, the necessity to let something go. And maybe that's just an internal process. It doesn't have to be something like scary or something external, but it's to let something go so that new life can come in. This eclipse, it plays off of Uranus and Taurus. And if you recall, Taurus is a money sign, and Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, 2019. This has been, at this point, 4 or 5 years, I guess 5 years at this point, of like really remaking your relationship with material stability and security, and maybe money and finance and assets and power, and am I safe? Do I have enough? Are really themes that are starting to come up. But like I said, whatever you need to do to let something go, and Mars is making what's called a square to Chiron in Aries, and this might be a week that really requires you to be brave about something, to either take control or take command or go after something that you want, and maybe having to confront a lot of fears in the process. Taurus, in a way, you are in the spotlight right now, even though really the spotlight energy is on Scorpio, your opposing sign. So it's your birthday season. Happy birthday. If your birthday is around May 4th, 5th, 6th, give or take, this is a big year for you. It's a dynamic year for you, one that might reveal changes, new directions, and something that looks very different than the previous birthday year. The spotlight for you, Taurus, is on relationships, and this is, picking up this story about like connection and interaction and socialization, and maybe having to make some decisions about relationships, especially with Mars and Cancer. And how do you, especially with Mercury retrograde, how do you weigh your options? For example, it is worthwhile, Taurus, and I know we've talked about this over the past few years, is that you've had Uranus in your sign since 2018, 2019. Certainly, if you are born in the first half of Taurus, this takes us all the way up to probably May 6th, May 7th, you already know what I'm talking about. Uranus has really pushed and demand an evolutionary process. And maybe that's where sometimes Taurus, and I'm saying this as a Scorpio, Taurus wants to hold on to what's safe, what works. I put that in air quotes, even if it no longer works. So how do you allow for a new order, a new sense of balance, a new life to come in, and especially whether it's a primary relationship in your life that's getting highlighted or just a larger framework about how do you connect with people, interact, socialize, be in partnership. Nevertheless, something has to change as you go into the next weeks, days, weeks, and even months. I do want to add, because I know I was talking about Pluto. For you, Taurus, Pluto is your 10th sign of career. And so this is sort of this initiatory retrograde that really highlights the fact that you are stepping into a much bigger chapter of your life, where your relationship with power and control and ambition and your professional life or your public life has to profoundly reform or transform. Gemini, so Mercury is your planet. It's presently retrograde, and here we are at the halfway mark of the retrograde. And for you, and I mentioned this last week, that Mercury retrograde is really taking you behind the scenes. Maybe you don't have as much energy as you normally do. Maybe you're in a space of retreat, reflection, personal, searching yourself for deeper answers and meaning. And maybe you need this. Maybe this is a time when a lot of energy is moving, and it's just good to sit with yourself and get quiet and not rush off and make any rash decisions. That said, this Scorpio full moon is putting the spotlight in the space that talks about health, wellness. How do you take care of yourself? What is your relationship with your day-to-day life? And this is a space that you've seen some changes or some eclipses since 2022, so it's not something that's wholly unfamiliar to you, but this eclipse sort of brings things to a conclusion, or at least the start of a conclusion. For you, this eclipse really plays on these larger themes about value and worth, like what's important to you, what's going to create stability and security in your life, and maybe having to make some necessary changes in some aspect of your day-to-day life so that things look differently. With this eclipse in your 6th, with Mercury, your planet, in the 12th, there's this element of health and wellness, both the physicality of health, but also the emotionality and the spirituality of health. And so how do you find the balance between the two? Maybe it's taking a holistic approach. For example, That said, with Pluto turning retrograde, Aquarius is your ninth sign of faith, truth, wisdom, philosophy, opening up your eyes to the world. And maybe this is this big, the beginning of this change in how you really see the world, or how do you express your faith, or how do you share your truth, or how do you communicate your beliefs to the world. And the ninth is also the space of higher education. It's the space of writers, people who publish, people who really share their philosophies and ideas. And maybe this is about, for some Geminis, really reshaping that larger framework and philosophy that your whole life runs through. Cancer. Cancer, in a way, you're kind of in the spotlight with this eclipse. You did have that solar eclipse back on April 20th. It was in your career sign. A couple of Cancer risings that had some changes in their career around that eclipse. That said, this eclipse on May 5th is in Scorpio. For you, Scorpio is your fifth sign. This is an eclipse that is getting back to the story that has been with you over the past, I would say, 18 months. Who are you, Cancer? Meaning, what are the things that individuate you? What's your personality? What's the sense of identity? How do you take your talents, gifts, and abilities seriously? And maybe with the South Node in Cancer as well, needing to do a little bit of soul searching about self, and sometimes where we can get into sometimes some self-destructive patterns. Of course, this is not going to be relevant for all Cancers or Cancer risings, but this eclipse also puts the spotlight on you. I said, why? Because the energy of the eclipse is pointing over to Mars and Cancer. Hey, you're a Cancer or a Cancer rising. So this is something where you have to really demonstrate who you are, take command, take the lead, really be in yourself, not your ego, meaning be in the truth of who you are and how that's going to have an impact on your career or your professional life, or how you take direction or take command in your outer world. So this is a big eclipse for you. It's really playing off of the solar eclipse that you had 2 weeks ago. Oh, and I will add that Pluto is turning retrograde in Aquarius, and Aquarius is your eighth sign. So, I was in the past few years, I was talking about the eighth room. It's a little bit of a different energy than when Saturn was there over the past few years, but it sort of is hinting to you at the greater, deeper emotional reformations and changes that need to happen that I think Saturn showed you over the past few years. Leo, my fellow fixed sign. So you've got a lot going on with these eclipses and Pluto retrograde. Let's start with Pluto retrograde. So over the past few years, while Saturn was in something called your seventh sign of relationships, you maybe kind of got some bigger points from Saturn about some things that need to change in relationship, or at least it's a space that you need to occupy more. Everything is going to be different for different Leos. Here comes Pluto. Pluto, unlike Saturn, is going to be in this space for a much longer time. So the retrograde today, May 1st, is your first key, your first checkpoint of a larger framework of time where relationships have to sort of overhaul on an emotional and energetic level. For some Leos, this means allowing there to be an equal power dynamic, not like transactional equal, but for things to be in balance. For other Leos, this means really looking at the type of people that you allow in your life and having to really make some deeper changes. For some Leos, this means a powerful relationship coming into your life that will shape and transform your life over the coming years and even the next decade plus. Pay attention, Leo. And like I said, it's a big week for you. And then we have the Scorpio Lunar Eclipse on May 5th. Well, Scorpio for you forms the base of your astrology chart. It talks about home, family, roots, foundation. And, Scorpio being Scorpio, maybe the deeper emotions that are sort of locked in that space for you. This plays off of two other eclipses that you had in Scorpio, one on October 25th and May 16th of last year. For some Leos, maybe you are moving. Maybe it's a bigger search for home and family. Where is home? Who is home? A change in the household. Somebody moves in, somebody moves out. But maybe with these two big points on like one half of your astrology axis, it's like it's two big chunks of your life are really demanding some attention. It's about other people right now. It's about family. It's about relationships. It's about connection. It's about feeling safe. And for you, Leo, to really see what are the themes that start to come up. With Mars, this the ruler of the eclipse in your 12th, it's really hitting on some deeper emotions and maybe a need to let go of something that you've been holding on to, whether it's from your past, whether it's from a family, whether it's an old relationship, to make space for something new in your life. Virgo, I was using you as an example earlier. So Virgo, your planet is Mercury, and it's halfway through its retrograde. No big deal, just a time to reflect, to soul search, to look at things from different perspectives. And I think with Mercury retrograde in something called your 9th sign, it's a good time to, listen to me for a moment, to at least take into account where maybe you're wrong. I don't know, you're probably always right, Virgo. Like I said, my mom was a Virgo. But the times where maybe you're not right, maybe needing to look at things from a different perspective, or at least open up your eyes more. Mercury is going to spend a bit of time in Taurus. It's not going to leave this space until the middle of June. So you've got some time to really think about what you believe in, what you stand for, and sometimes where judgments and beliefs can sort of narrow your view, for example. That said, this lunar eclipse in Scorpio is at the opposite end of the sky and the opposite end of you. It's sort of demanding new perspective, new vantage points. It puts a spotlight on information, ideas, communication, maybe having a powerful conversation with somebody, maybe receiving news that changes the way you see something, or maybe this need to take a class, focus on education, and maybe again look for a lot of different options that maybe you have not been considering. With the energy of the eclipse pointing towards your 11th of friends and community, there might be something about either a larger sense of belonging, your connection to the collective, a connection to the greater whole, or something coming up with a friend. As I said in the example in the intro, Aquarius for you is something called your 6th sign of health and wellness. And so Pluto turning retrograde here is your first big checkpoint with a larger framework of time that's going to take you over the coming days, weeks, and even years. Pluto is trying to show you what needs to be reformed and transformed. And for some Virgos, it means making some big changes in health and wellness, or making some big changes in how you organize and run your day-to-day life. Libra, so your planet is Venus. It's still in Gemini, and it'll leave Gemini and go into Cancer on May 7th, but that's, for next week. But that said, this eclipse for you, Libra, it puts in the spotlight Scorpio. Scorpio is a money sign for you. It's about, what do you value? What do you spend your money on? How do you invest money? What do you think is kind of like the currency that runs your life? Because it's going to be different for every Libra. For some Libras, they need a lot of money. For some Libras, they don't. For some Libras, they think this is important. For some Libras, they don't think this is important. It's okay. Everybody's different. However, we're all human beings. We need the basics. Roof over our head. We need a sense of, resource, whether that's financial resource, whether that's resources, food, and the things that really kind of give us a sense of stability and anchorage in our lives. And the Scorpio eclipse is playing off of two other eclipses we had in Scorpio, October 25th and May 16th of 2022. And so this might bring to a conclusion a larger story about money and income that's been with you. And for some Libras, it's the purchase of something, property, investments, but also looking at wealth, power, debt, taxes. For you Taurus is your sign that talks about other people's money. It talks about finances and estates. And so you're really sort of navigating a lot of these emotional themes, and even these emotional themes that talk about money and stability for you. This eclipse is activating Uranus, and Uranus has been in your 8th sign since 2018, 2019. And so, for you to really see something illuminated with this eclipse, and maybe it's something that you weren't really considering about, sort of the hidden motivations behind money and income and power and intimacy and vulnerability, and for some Libras, a need to really get deeper into their emotional core. With Venus still up in the 9th, it's sort of looking at these larger questions of faith and truth and meaning, and maybe how either it's a leap of faith or you need to re-examine how you see things and how you see the world. Pluto is turning retrograde in something called your 5th sign, and this is the very beginning of a larger story about transforming who you are. It's not to say you are becoming somebody that you're not, but stripping away, Pluto style, anything that's in the way of you expressing exactly who you are. Scorpio, belle of the ball, Scorpio. So you're in the spotlight this week with that Scorpio Lunar Eclipse on May 5th. If your birthday is around November 6th, 7th, 8th, give or take, this is really putting you in the spotlight. This is going to be a dynamic 6 months and quite possibly a dynamic coming days and weeks for you. Dynamic means something is changing. It's a pivot point. Maybe you're having to deal with life, and for some, a select few deal with a capital L, life. You know what I'm talking about. That said, I can't think of the word. Taurus is your relationship sign, and this eclipse is playing off of a larger story around relationship and connection that's been with you since 2018, 2019. Every Scorpio is going to live this differently, and I've seen Scorpios who have been single for 10 years, and somebody has come in the last year or 2 or 3 that is radically different than anybody they've been with. For some Scorpios, this eclipse is about really bringing somebody into the life. Or for some Scorpios, this is about leaving a relationship. It's about trying to reassert who you are and to put a relationship back into balance. Because when the eclipse is on you, it's like everything's on you. You got to stand on your own 2 feet. And sometimes with relationships, somebody else has the power, or there's a kind of a complicated power dynamic. But to be fair, Scorpio likes to hold on to control, and I think this eclipse is getting to this heart of Scorpio needing to, on some level, let go of control. With Mars, the ruler of this eclipse, in Cancer, this eclipse is really putting the spotlight on faith and truth and meaning. What do you believe in? What do you stand for? And for some Scorpios, a need to make a leap of faith or to re-examine what do you believe in. Like what's, maybe sometimes the way that we can get a little myopic about our beliefs or what we think is possible. But this is a very powerful week for you, Scorpio, especially with Pluto turning retrograde. It's turning retrograde in your 4th sign of home and family. This is your first checkpoint with a larger story of completely changing the power structures around home and family, feeling safe and stable and secure in this world, and feeling like you are actually supported. Sagittarius. I know I said this last week, but just to be a reminder that in a couple weeks' time, Jupiter, your planet, is going to go into Taurus. So it's wrapping up its time in Aries, and this has been about a year, give or take, because Jupiter has gone in and out, about really getting into your creativity, a larger conversation about self and identity and who you are. And for some Sagittarius, is even children. Jupiter changing sign next week, and we will talk about this more, but this eclipse season sort of brings the story in advance, is this focus on health, wellness, how do you take care of your body, how do you inhabit your body, how do you run your daily life, how do you show up in your daily life. And for you, Sagittarius, to look back on 2018, 2019, I have seen this, of course, be different for every Sagittarius, but I've seen Sagittarius, start going to the gym all the time. There's like a major change in health and wellness. positive change in health and wellness. For some, few Sagittarius, is something else that's been going on that's demanded their attention in health and wellness. For some Sagittarius, it's like their day-to-day life looks nothing like it did in 2019, for example. This eclipse in Scorpio is something called Sagittarius' 12th sign. It's about release and endings. You've come to the end of a long journey. You can't keep holding on to something. For some Sagittarius, is this the need to look at sort of that's the worlds that we straddle, meaning the physical plane and the non-physical plane, the things that we can touch and the things that we can't touch. Service, whether it's physical service, but also service of spiritual nature. But that said, it's a need to really come to the end of something and to make space for something else to come in. Pluto is turning retrograde in something called your third sign of voice and communication. This is your first checkpoint with a larger story of reformation and transformation of how you speak, listen, and learn. Capricorn, so, I just kind of keep saying, like, your planet, Saturn, it's in Pisces, so this is a much more emotional and spiritual of a dimension of a time for you. That said, let's get to this eclipse. This eclipse is in Scorpio, and Scorpio is your sign of friends, community, that sense of belonging and connection. Who are your friends? Who are your community? What is your relationship with the greater whole, whether it's society, humanity, the collective, for example? And for you, a Capricorn, to go back and to see how these eclipses connect to events from October 25th with that solar eclipse, and May 16th with that lunar eclipse. This eclipse on May 5th of this week, is bringing something to a conclusion or to a close. With that eclipse pointing towards Mars and Cancer is a major sign for you, Capricorn. It's your sign of relationship. So there's something very relational in this eclipse dynamic for you, whether it's about really putting the spotlight on a relationship or sort of these larger questions about how do you interact and socialize with people. With Pluto turning retrograde in Aquarius, it's sort of that first checkpoint in a larger period of your life where your relationship with the material world is going to see a powerful transformation. This is going to mean different things to different Capricorns. Capricorn is the sign of matter and manifestation. Typically, Capricorn is very hardwired to build and construct their material world and to achieve and to accumulate. Like I said, it's going to be different for everybody, but Pluto says that whatever the power is behind this instinct and need, there will be a transformation and reformation over the coming months, years, and even the next 2 decades. Aquarius. So Aquarius, a big week for you. Let's first start with you. Pluto has just turned retrograde in your sign. And so this is your first taste, or your first checkpoint with a larger story of reformation and transformation that's going to be with you over the coming months, years, and even the next 2 decades. I know 2 decades is just too big to even wrap your head around. That's not the point, but it's for you to understand that you are at the very beginning of a major shift and transformation in your life that will play out differently for every Aquarius. Pluto is fundamentally a planet about reformation and power and changing and reforming the energy that is behind something, in this case, the energy that's behind you. So for some Aquariuses, this is the start of a major life change. It might not be so obvious right now. For some Aquariuses, this is the need to really stand on your own, to find your individuality, like your sense of autonomy, for example. Maybe that's not something you're used to, for example. That said, this eclipse in Scorpio is in your sign of career. It's either career or it's your sense of duty and responsibility in the world, the title after your name, and the placement in this world. So for you, and I would go back, Aquarius, and I would look, what was going on around that solar eclipse on October 25th, 2022, and that lunar eclipse on May 16th of 2022. Because these eclipses are all connected, And for some, this eclipse brings something to a powerful conclusion, or at least the beginning of a resolution. For example, this is all playing off of Uranus and the Sun in Taurus down in something called your fourth home, family. These are three, Aquarius, Scorpio, and Taurus are three of the four of the major axes of your life. Like I said, this is a big eclipse for you. So whether you are seeing, and since 2018, major changes in home and family, whether you made a move or somebody moved in, somebody moved out, or big changes in the household, for example, this is like one of those moments where a lot of things come together. So like I said, every Aquarius is going to experience this differently. Finally, Pisces. So Pisces, let's start with this eclipse. So you are a water sign. So water signs, you feel things. That's sort of how you are driven. And Scorpio for you is something called your ninth sign. This puts into the spotlight these sort of larger questions, philosophical beliefs, truth, meaning, like, what do I stand for? How do I see the world? And maybe you are feeling very philosophical during this eclipse season. This eclipse does connect to two other eclipses, the eclipse of October 25th and the eclipse, the solar eclipse of October 25th and the lunar eclipse of May 16th of 2022. Beliefs is not something that's concrete, meaning the ninth sign, in your case, it's not a space that, is really tangible. Unless you're publishing a book at this time, unless you're enrolling in university or going back to college, it's hard for you to really kind of see the tangible aspects of this eclipse. But this is an eclipse that's really trying to get you to search your soul, to really look at hidden motivations of what you believe in, what you think is true. With Taurus season, this is part of this larger awakening to really kind of examine, or like opening up to different options, changing the way you use your voice, the way that you communicate, the way that you think and listen and learn. For some Pisces, this is very much about writing, speaking, and communicating, and maybe starting a manuscript, maybe publishing a manuscript. Maybe you're teaching, or maybe you're going back to school. But for a lot of Pisces, this is going to get into these deeper philosophical, spiritual, and for some even religious beliefs. These two signs for you, the third and the ninth, Taurus and Scorpio, they are your travel signs. And for some Pisces, you are planning a voyage or thinking about, seeing the world. And sometimes we can't literally see the world. We have to sort of find the world within books, media, for example. That said, Aquarius for you is something called your 12th sign. And it's a little bit hard to see, something in the 12th because on some level, symbolically, it's invisible. So Pluto's retrograde is not as obvious, let's say in comparison to other signs. But it's sort of your first hint or checkpoint that you are stepping into a larger chapter, 20 years in total, of completely reforming and transforming your relationship with your spiritual life. Spirituality is very subjective. It means, that there's certain qualities that are objective, but your experience of spirituality is subjective. So, of course, every Pisces is going to experience this differently. But for you to, whether it's a fear of connecting to the greater whole, a fear of you opening up your intuitive gifts and abilities, or getting into the deeper power structures and dynamics that are sort of interfacing between you and your spirit self, this is the start of a much bigger story in your life. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology for the week of May 1st through 7th, 2023. So for those that are watching live, I thank you. Even if you're watching on the replay, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, also thank you. Always say hello. And I know for some of you are familiar faces, whether you watch every week or you are my clients or both. I know some of you say I listen to you on Tuesday morning, or right now it is Tuesday morning in Australia, our friends in Australia and New Zealand, for example. But for those that, you can book a consultation with me. I do have my Eclipse webinar if you want a 2.5 hour deep dive beyond what I've given you here. And of course, I will see you all next week. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.